Cool. Well, the audience should know the drill at this stage. Please go to Slido and ask any questions. We'll try and cover them towards the end. We're going to have half an hour from around now. And to kick things off, if we go one by one, and please give a short introduction as well as an introduction about the project that you work for. Oh, me.
Hello. It works, nice. Hello, my name is Simon. I work for a company called ETHDay. It's a core dev behind working on the Graph protocol. The Graph protocol is an indexing and querying protocol on Ethereum and other networks.
Cool, it's working. Hey guys, I'm Francesco. I'm working at a company called Consensys, and those days I'm basically like working with community and developer relations team, and building top of the funnel, trying to engage with Web3 developers every day, to events and anything that has to do with building.
Hey, I'm Austin Griffith. I'm supported by the EF. I work on developer tooling and developer onboarding. I built Scaffold ETH, and then around that, I wrote a curriculum called Speedrun Ethereum. And you can go to speedrunethereum.com if you're a developer and learn how to build on Ethereum.
Cool.
Cool bow tie over there.
Woo, well, you got a real fan there.
I like that bow tie.
Thank you, Austin. Yeah, well, to kick things off, I think, with tools and infrastructure, right, you really exist kind of behind the scenes. Can you talk a little bit about, what problems you actually go about solving within the ecosystem and why you think they're really important? Because I think you have some different viewpoints on this.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the graph solves the data reading problem, actually, that we have on blockchains. So blockchain protocol basically is optimized for writing and also incentivized. You pay the miners to mine your block so you can write to the blockchain. But if you want to read stuff from it, it actually gets a little bit more complex because you need to dig through all those transactions on the blockchain. Let's say for Uniswap, if you want to see the charts about the trading volumes and the prices, it's powered by the graph, because otherwise this page would take, I don't know, maybe a half an hour to load.
Sure, I can just extend a little bit what are the challenges I see in the industry, right? Cross-chain liquidity, I think that's a big one. I think we should support basically like what we're trying to build with those Metamask snaps is nothing else than extensions for non-EVM compatible blockchain. I think anyone has the right to build on different chains, and I think this is a big challenge that we have to solve in those days.
I think my tools are kind of like just for developers. They're not really behind the scenes. It's more just like burner wallets are good for like a developer to quickly be able to interface with a smart contract without having to sign a bunch of transactions. I will kind of like lean back a little bit here and give props to these guys when it comes to there's kind of like building the infrastructure and then decentralizing the infrastructure and building the wallet and making the wallet super safe so people don't lose money, right? So behind the scenes, these folks are working really, really hard, not just making the thing work, but making it decentralized and making it safe. So, props to these guys.
Thanks.
I just want to say props to these guys, because this guy and Nader are basically the top of the funnel educator ever.
Yeah.
And Patrick, yeah.
Yep. Great.
Well, I'd like to double click on that decentralized aspect that you just mentioned, because obviously I think as there are these providers, these infrastructure providers, ultimately they start centralized, and then there is this argument of progressive decentralization, but it's kind of like the necessary devil in a way. Like, what are your thoughts about that, about these types of providers, and can it cause unnecessary centralization and reliance? I think there was an incident with Infra where it went down for a while, and that broke a lot of stuff, unfortunately, but then it was fixed, so it's okay.
I mean, I think the graph by itself is actually an interesting example of this progressive decentralization as the hosted service as we see it today, and actually also currently powers Uniswap, for example, that I talked before, is a centralized server that is actually now ran by ETHDay, but it was necessary to build it in a centralized way in the beginning to actually have this proof of concept and to play around with the concept of subgraphs. How do you interact with such a thing? But now, since 1 year, it is possible to use the decentralized graph network and actually doing the same thing that you do with the hosted service in a decentralized way. So I think for the complexity of protocols like the graph, it's inevitable somehow.
if we come at it from the perspective of a builder, if I'm trying to quickly spin up an NFT display, I'm not going to build my own indexer. I'm not going to parse the chain in the browser. I'm going to find the easiest NPM package to install so it shows those NFTs. And a lot of times that's going to be some central server that could fall over, right? So on our end, we need to do a good job of having those packages available that are decentralized, that have the full breadth of decentralization behind it, so it doesn't fall over the same. But if we come at it from the developer's point of view, you have to understand that they're going to grab the first thing off the shelf that works. They're going to try 3 things, and the one that works is the one that's going to get shipped, right? So we need to do a good job behind the scenes of having that NPM package be as resilient as possible.
Yeah, I just want to add on that, for example, like, as you're saying, developers want to get stuff built quickly, right? And, decentralization is a progression. It's not like binary 0 to 1. So basically, you just progress. Infura is not centralized. Maybe it will be. Is a progression that is actually making people and developers building quicker stuff easier. And we are just getting there. We are so early in the space. And I think it's just a matter of time that you see always solutions spin out, maybe centralized and then decentralized. I love, the way that, Austin is building Scaffold ETH. Like, it's part of a journey, and maybe, in the future, or maybe they're already there, like front-end libraries that you can pre-build, and having basically like 24 hours hackathon MVP done in a fraction of the time. I remember 4 years ago it was like such a nightmare, and now it's totally different.
Well, how do you think, like, the speed of development versus 5 years ago versus it is now? Do you think there is a considerable difference, or do you think there are still some major hurdles that people have to jump through?
Both.
Yeah.
It's like way faster now, right? Like when we see it, I feel like about ETH New York 2019, I started to see it really speed up. We started to see, instead of, I did this one hackathon project that took all weekend to get this gross HTML page up where I could click this and the Metamask came up, to now I'm building a block, or I'm using a set of building blocks and I'm building a product with those building blocks. And that was like 2019. And I would give a lot of props to the hard hat guys. I feel like that was one of the big pieces of infrastructure that came in that was just like 20 earmuffs over here, Consensys guy. It was like 20 or 30% better than Truffle, and I think it sped up development, and developers enjoyed it. So like that's one big one. So I think development has sped up. It is a lot easier. There's a lot more things on the shelf. It's a lot easier to grab a few building blocks and make a product. But I think we have a long ways to go, especially in the realm of decentralizing these things and making these things more resilient.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, 5 years ago, when I started working in the space, then the graph didn't exist, and so we had to do this indexing by ourselves. I worked for the project called Melonport, that's now Enzyme, and we were fully dedicated to being fully decentralized. And then in the end, we ended up kind of shipping an Electron app that people needed to download, and then you started up that app, and the first thing it does is it starts to index the blockchain for you, so we can actually display some charts, and that was so cumbersome. And so in that regard, there is a step forward, but still some stuff, when I look at it, kind of compared to Web 2 tech, like if you look at React, for example, kind of how battle-tested it is as a library, and then you look at some libraries that are heavily used in the blockchain space, where you still have kind of these rough edges, then you think, okay, maybe there needs to be more thought on it and more people working on this.
Mm. Well, if you see, like, from your perspective, ideally this is outside of your project, but it may also be something inside, is like, what do you think has really been the biggest breakthrough in terms of tools and infrastructure? Like, is there one thing that you can point at and said, that made a huge impact on the industry?
The graph counts, right? The graph. Hard hat, I think, is another big one.
I mean, I think every rollups, and faster transaction, cheaper transaction, and deployment infrastructure. Like Infra, Alchemy, those guys.
Even like Alchemy, like creating competition for the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Scaffold ETH.
Ethereum.
Yes.
Shout out. But I think not only like about tooling and infrastructure, like a big, a big change that we had compared 5 years ago is educational resources. Like, like you get those guys like that, they're making educational content, and people from Web 2 can spin up their dApps in what, less than 40 hours? Even like in, what it was ETHDay that you spin up like on mainnet, half an hour workshop. That was amazing, right?
Nice. Obviously, the big talk of the town at the moment is the merge. What kind of impact do you think that this will have on infrastructure providers, if any, and also all the tools, the indexing, things like this?
I mean, for the graph, what I know is like the indexers, they kind of need to index the beacon chain completely, and at some point they need to upgrade the Aragon thing, and for them it will be quite challenging, but it will, I mean, everybody's looking forward to it, and other than that, the graph doesn't really take that much care of it because it just sees the blockchain as one history, so I don't expect big hiccups there.
And from the standpoint, again, from the standpoint of the lazy developer who just wants to build something, everything is technically going to work the same, except for we're going to get some new tools to play with, like BLS signatures and stuff. Like, I'm still like, ooh, what's going to happen?
Yay!
But, yeah, it's from what I've heard, from the standpoint of the caveman developer that just wants to build a product on top, everything will work pretty much similar. You'll just get some new tools to add to your toolbox.
Yeah, mostly this engine API, and will perform the load of work. But I just want to say, basically, the things that will not change, because we're in the developer conference today, will probably be the developer experience. And by the way, tomorrow we will interview also like Tim and Drake on the merge changes. And we want to say, like, Drake is always using this metaphor about changing the diesel car with the electric car while you are in a freeway at 90, and the driver even doesn't notice that. So and that's the developer, and I think this metaphor is exactly what people are referring to. The developer experience will not change, but people get much more secure and scalable transaction out of it.
I want to remind you guys at this point, please ask questions, because we're going to transition to that in a moment. Based off of the experience that you guys have had, like, are there any kind of unsolved problems or opportunities that you see in the tools and infrastructure space, or you're wondering, why aren't more people doing that?
Have you ever tried to get the transactions for an account from the chain? You basically have to start from block 0 and look through all the transactions for that address, and then move on to block 1 and look through all the transactions in the block looking for that address. So just indexing is like a huge issue that, like, maybe we should build that into the client a little bit better. Like, wouldn't it be cool if I could query Geth for all my transactions for an account?
That was really subtle.
Tooling in general, actually, I think. Yes, some of the underlying tools that are still used, I mean, as good as they are, let's say Ethers.js, I mean, it's a very good tool, but it's just, I think it's just one maintainer, right? It's not, maybe some community maintainers, but like...
Rickmoo counts as multiple people, I think.
That's true, that's true.
He's a beast.
It's a 10x. So 10 developers, but still the bus factor is quite big. So actually, but maybe it's also a little bit the tragedy of the commons, right? So because you can just use Ethers, there is no token, you do not pay for it, and so I would love to see more people get involved with this tooling stuff and really make it solid proof, so that we don't have kind of heartbleed problems on Ethereum at some point, because just one weak link had a problem.
Yeah, basically like differentiates clients, and not having this monopoly of Geth, for example. I think people are starting using Besu and Teku moreover, but I think that's definitely a monopoly. But what was the question again? The
unsolved problems that you see in the ecosystem.
I don't know. I would like to see more, front make life easier for developer, focusing on front end and focusing more on solidity and less on the front end. It's always like a pain in those workshops where people just give them like a pre-built front-end libraries. I mean, basically what you're doing with scaffold.
You spend 10 minutes on the smart contract and 40 minutes on the React, getting the elements where they need to be.
Yeah, and I don't know, and the other things maybe is a little bit different, but I think more DAO aggregator toolings, because right now we have bunch of aggregator, DeFi Llama, and everybody spinning those aggregator out about the layer 2 we saw before with rollups. But I think DAO aggregator, more information about governance, that educating much more like also the end users. And a part of that, I think also maybe smart contract security platform. You have fuzzing, you have diligence, you have different things, but it's still very difficult to the end user to understand quickly if a project is some sort of like, not well done from the technical level, right? I think tooling around this might be, like even no-code security platform, I don't know. Yeah.
Even like the seed phrase and a private key, and when you lose it, you're hosed forever, right?
Yeah.
It's awful UX. That's like, I would call that an unsolved problem just because we haven't built a great smart contract wallet. I mean, there's great smart contract wallets out there, Gnosis Saves, Argents, but like maybe there's some things that need to change at the protocol level to make those smart contracts more powerful, like delegated execution and stuff like that. But that's another unsolved problem. It's just like that bad UX of losing.
There's a whole bag of eggs, basically.
Yeah. And we're talking about how difficult it is to build on this stack and how a lazy developer will pull something off the shelf. Maybe if it was less complicated, there'd be less developer apathy toward decentralizing, and the developer would be thinking about decentralization out of the box, and maybe that we'd see better products getting built.
Yeah, that's fair. Is there anything from like the stuff that you're working on currently about maybe your roadmap that you would maybe like to share, or something cool that's on the horizon? Hashtag alpha.
Win token? Is that a win token? Probably this guy.
No, nothing else.
I mean, the graph roadmap was recently published, and there is a lot going on with cross-chain indexing, indexing other chains, indexing other data sources, like Arweave is planned, Cosmos is on the way, and a lot of improvements in terms of indexing speed. There's also much to see in the next months. It's definitely checking out. I mean, like it's probably 5 to 10 paper pages blog post with a lot of information. But if you are curious what's going on in the graph, then that's a good place to start.
Yeah, I want to say decentralization is all about community, right? We're building tools to give power back to the developers. So like, for example, as I mentioned before, like this cross-chain liquidity, like people should be able to build on top of an infrastructure. For example, I don't know, Metamask, building snaps. The community, the developer are building those snaps. They have the pain point. They don't have like this Solana, I don't know, integration, build your snap. And it should not be like, that the team at this core having all the due diligence on the ground. It should be that the community is starting to build something like what's happening with the rollups and layer 2s, right? People are feeling a pain point and they just start building on top of this layer. And I think that's why like this, I'm super pumped about these extensions on top of MetaMask that are not owned by MetaMask. Is some sort of like layer 1 for all the problems that people solve. Not just about, that's why I'm quite excited about that. Yeah.
Cool.
I'm bringing in the last question, and I thought of another problem in the space, and that's how expensive audits are. We need more auditors in the space to make audits cheaper, and I think that with Build Guild and with Scaffold ETH, we're focusing on kind of the one, like you've gone 0 to 1, you understand how to deploy a NFT and a token, but really understanding the space takes this whole tour of duty where you need to build a whole bunch of things, a DEX and a multi-sig, and you need to get closer to being auditor level, and we as an ecosystem need to put challenges up and resources up to get people from, I can build a simple DEX to, I can actually audit this like AMM platform, and just have a better auditing ecosystem.
What are your top tools that you suggest to developers to use it today, like for auditing easier and faster?
I'm a terrible auditor, so I don't think I would be the best person to ask. I hear like Foundry is a really great new tool for running tests quickly. shout out to Georgios on that one.
Cool. Well, we can now go to some of the audience questions. So the first one is, and one of you can answer this and we can go from there, but how are L2 sequencers kept censorship resistant?
Ooh. I don't know enough about it at like the protocol level to know how it works.
I think that's a question for Twitter.
Yeah. You got to ask the L2 guys. But what's cool about those sequencers on Optimism is they're earning a bunch of fees, and those fees are getting fed back into public goods, and it's like at the protocol level. So there's something else happening there that's very magical that I'm really interested in, and it's the public goods, the retroactive public goods funding.
Cool, cool.
All right. Got a retro PGF fan in the house. All right.
This one is, how will the graph scale well for layer 2 chains? QuickSwap had some issues with their analytics page on Polygon when blocks moved faster than the indexing.
Yeah, no, I like the question. It's actually, this one keeps me very busy, or like the whole team. The answer is, so the graph, kind of decentralized development into core dev teams, and actually by doing so, the first core dev team after Edge and Node was Streaming Fast. And Streaming Fast created a technology called the fire hose, which can increase indexing speed 10x and more. And this thing is currently being rolled out, and will more or less solve that problem. And I saw it already in the demos, and it really looks impressive. And so this will be rolled out, but more performance things are actually in the making. Indexing performance is actually one of the highest priority. If you go to the roadmap, you see there are a lot of initiatives just targeting at exactly that problem.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. Sounds like a tough one. Yeah. One question is around the new tools for after the merge. Could you maybe mention some of them?
My one tool was the BLS signature, where you can use groups of people to sign things.
Cool.
So like, yeah, that was all I know of.
Okay. And then there was another one about the tools aimed towards security. I think you mentioned one. Are there any other tools around security for the audience?
Well, you should take on the Ethernaut challenge. That's one of the first things you should do. Hard Hat and Foundry are both great. Like, write good tests. Go see previous audits. I was talking to an auditor the other day, and the way they train their new audits, or their new hires, is basically have them audit stuff before they audit stuff and see if they can find it. Go find an audit, and before you read it, try to audit the contract and see if you can find things first, right? There's tons of audits out there where you can learn a lot from it. Just start by going to Solidity by example and looking through all the attacks and go and reproduce those attacks either in Remix or Scaffold ETH or Hard Hat or Foundry, and just like reproduce them and learn how those attacks work. That's going to get you a lot closer to being able to become a real auditor.
Yeah. You tried out fuzzing. Yeah. That's also quite interesting with the new release.
There's one more question about how do you see wallets in games and the easy interactions of the blockchain, and like, I guess for you with Metamask, is that something you're actively working on?
For what?
For gaming, it's wallets and gaming.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite interested to see gaming on layer 2s. You know, like those Avagogi, even like side chains on, you know, not mentioning, you know, Scamavis and Axie, but it's super interesting how they scale up. But I think a dedicated wallet for use cases makes sense, but I think it's better to focus on the main use case and then build on top, having, for example, Snap extension for like gamers that are actually allowing, you know, specific methods to do stuff. I think, and I mean, your demo was great about the gaming that you spin up in also in 1 hour, less than 1 hour.
We kind of showed how the burner wallet was powerful there, right? Where I basically had a character on a map, and I was moving that character north or south or east or west. And with MetaMask, it's a lot more secure, but when I hit north, it pops a thing up. I say yes, we wait a little bit, the block gets mined, the piece moves, I hit north again, repeat that whole process. But then what I did was I sent a little money to a burner wallet, and you'll see a lot of blockchain games using session wallets, burner wallets, where you fund a wallet that's less secure because you've got a private key and local storage, but then behind the scenes, that wallet is signing transactions very quickly. And I was able to like go left, 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 up, 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 up. And they're all transactions, and they're getting signed, and they're going to the mempool, and they're getting mined, but there's not that like pop-up, right? And I can almost imagine a version of Metamask, and I bet Dan will never do this, but a little autopilot checkbox that just says like keep like if I keep sending you transactions of this type, less than $1, just go ahead and send them for this session, right?
That
where
sounds
you
like
can,
a feature
turn on
request.
autopilot. Yeah. Dan will never do that. going back to, we want to make things usable, but security is like the most important part there, right?
Super, thank you. And the last question is, do you have any tips for like the educational providers to encourage devs more towards infrastructure as opposed to building the apps? Or actually, do you feel like there's actually a fair balance at the moment?
I think it's just like awareness, right?
Yeah.
I feel like when I built my first app and it was totally insecure, I got like griefed a lot, like, bro, this is not secure, right? Like there's a lot of griefing, and it's like, oh, okay, I need to do a better job of making this more decentralized or something. It's just like awareness within the space. Yes, you pulled those things off the shelf. Yes, you made an NFT app pretty quickly, but here's all the like 6 places where that's gonna fall over when it actually like gets pushed on by anything.
Yeah, I also want to add awareness. I also want to add like, going to hackathon and trying to build spin-up stuff easy. And then when you actually have this type of like, education, even going, trying to, get some, third-party company advisory, trying to help out, contribute to the house. I think it's, it's just a progression of things. And then you will just keep up, doing what you love, basically. Yeah?
Cool. Well, do you have any closing comments or things that you want to share with the audience? Or
speedrunethereum.com. If you are a developer or you know a developer that's a Web 2 developer that wants to get into Web 3, tell them to speedrun Ethereum.
Oh my God.
Yeah, or Developer DAO. Come to Developer DAO and go. If you want to learn, there are a lot of helpful people around. A lot of Developer DAO people are also here, so this is a very good place to start.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Just keep learning and build cool stuff, right? And just have mentors around you, like this guy here. It's like.
Someone was asking me out here if they're not a technical person or they're not a developer, how do they get into this space? And my answer was become a power user. Get MetaMask, learn how that seed phrase works, go swap some tokens, go get an ENS name, go deploy a Gnosis safe, understand how a multi-sig works. Like, become a power user and everything else will fall into place. There's always a job to be done somewhere.
That's fair. Well, please give a big round of applause to these panelists. Thank you so much for coming. Absolute pleasure.